I hope with this type of interview and this type of cataloging of our experiences, that when people start to understand that, you know, I'm not someone who used drugs or dropped out of school or all the stereotypical things that we think surrendering mothers are in this country, people will start to understand, well, wait a minute, she could be my neighbor or my coworker or, you know, my sister. And start to understand that it's not as simple as, you know, a stranger is going to take their child and everybody's going to live happily ever after. I can tell you from experience that ain't the case.
Tonight we are sharing accounts from women courageously coming forward for the first time on American television with their accounts of coercion, manipulation, and fraudulent adoption practices. Since last October, we have interviewed nearly 100 women spanning several generations. They say that as young mothers, they were lied to, denied their rights, and duped into handing over their babies for adoption. They say it's time to lift the veil of secrecy. But what about those who worked in the adoption industry during the baby scoop era? We talked to a woman who corroborates these mothers' claims.
I started working in adoptions as a clerical person in 1960, and over the next 50 years, I worked for 2 different agencies.
Her name is Mary. She asked us not to reveal her last name or the adoption agencies where she worked or their religious affiliation. She says she met thousands of young women who were unmarried, pregnant, and seeking help.
Well, today most adoptions are, quote, open adoptions, but that wasn't the case some years ago. What was the situation?
In 1960, when I started, adoptions were very closed. The emphasis was on keeping the secret of the birth mother and providing a child to parents who might otherwise not have one. And that was the entire emphasis.
Many people who are alive today can't imagine or can barely imagine a situation. What led to this? Was it the fear of stigma?
Very much so. At that time, unwed mothers were very much looked down on. It could even rub off on their whole family. The gossip was terrible.
Mary is retired now, and her feelings about what happened to all those young women and their babies have changed.
They may not have had the best practices, but usually the intentions were good.
Your contention is, while the intentions were good, the practices were at the very least open to question.
We learned over time that we had made some mistakes in how we handled things. And what changed our mind was when we started hearing en masse the stories of adult adoptees and birth mothers who had relinquished their children years earlier.
Many of those babies were born in maternity homes. There was a time in America, especially in the 1950s and 60s, but on into the 70s, when those homes were so crowded, there was often a waiting list to get in. And there was also the cost. So some unwed pregnant women were sent to live and often work with families they didn't know. These were called wage homes. And that's where Laura Beale found herself when she was 16 years old and pregnant in 1972.
In these Catholic homes, you would become basically the maid, the nanny, the cook, and for about $10 a week. And the deal was that you would get 1 day off a week, and after you had the baby, you got a 2-week recoup time at the house without having to work. So that's where I was basically hidden away.
The people that lived there were terrible to me. I really hated being there.
In 1966, Karen Wilson Buderbaugh worked at a wage home for a prominent Catholic family in Washington, D.C.
They actually made me serve drinks, mixed drinks, at their parties. 17 years old and very pregnant, wearing maternity clothes, and I was serving drinks to their friends at parties that they would host, and they would talk about me. I was their conversation piece, their little unwed mother. It was humiliating.
We spoke to a woman who was in a wage home when she was pregnant, and she described an almost indentured servitude at this wage home where she went to live with what she described as a wealthy Catholic family and was there, this was her word, their slave of sorts during her pregnancy. Now, based on your knowledge and experience, what runs through your mind when you hear that kind of description?
I would not be surprised if there weren't a significant number that did meet that description.
Well, it doesn't take much imagination to understand that at least the pregnant girl or very young woman is at the very least vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
Maternity homes still exist today, but back in the baby scoop era, there were hundreds scattered across the country.
That Roman papacy has done, and I hope it explodes. They are some uncircumcised dogs. I hope that they are castrated so that they do not have any more children, so that they do not produce that species anymore. When I speak like this, I speak of that stinking pen. And then they want you to respect them. Respect our religions. Religion is not to be respected. You uncover the truth. You say the truth, no matter what.